I want to say that the nuclear material security has a history of nearly 20 years. The first time it hit the ceiling was when, after the collapse of Soviet Union, there was tons and tons of material lying around in the rump Soviet Union. And there were cases where people were caught in Germany and Western Europe at the airport carrying some material. Now that set everyone thinking. And this was immediately in the wake of the Iraq first Gulf War, where Saddam Hussein was trying to acquire things under the cloak of the NPT itself. His country was a member of the NPT, but he cheated and he got it. So there was a great scare that others who want to cheat might get this. So that's how this whole process started, and illicit trafficking of nuclear material was the subject taken up. Now, immediately concern was expressed, a conference was made, was organized, people came and they said, yes, it's an issue of concern. However, responsibility-wise, nobody was willing to give responsibility to an international process. They said this is all, and it had reasons to do so, which are valid even today. The reasons are that theft or illicit access to nuclear material or to subvert the nuclear materials storage are all issues in domestic criminal justice system. So it requires forensics, it requires intelligence, it requires a lot of that kind of a track, apart from guards and guns and gates. So many countries were very reluctant to discuss this openly. However, so this continued. But after 9/11, this threat was compounded several orders of magnitude, because the suicide bomber was the fact of life then after 9/11. In the past, when they discussed plutonium and uranium, they felt that to handle plutonium is dangerous and risky because it has isotopes which are radioactive, and so the person, if you were to handle plutonium, he might damage himself. So that was sufficient deterrent to an extent. So, but once a desperado comes, then he doesn't mind risking his life. So then these things came up in a very magnified way. And the US then had the war on terror, so nuclear terrorism was the new fear. And then this whole issue of nuclear material security and illicit trafficking, that came to fore. Now, there was another success story. So what Ambassador Mansingh said about President Obama is true. I really find that our own interest in this, India's interest in this, is because President Obama has taken this issue up front. And actually, in the nuclear field, this is the only constructive process which is underway, apart from the NPT review conferences. And Obama has raised it to the level of heads of government and heads of states. So this brings attention, focus, profile to this issue at the highest level. However, apart from him, there are other prestigious people like Senator Sam Nunn and Senator Dick Lugar. These are the two people in the early Clinton administration, 94 to 2000, who took this cooperative threat threat reduction program, under which they put a lot of effort to get this material from the rump Soviet Union into safe hands. And there they worked with the IAEA, they worked bilaterally, they worked with Russia. So that was, I consider it actually in the 19th decade, a most successful effort, which was done quietly with meticulous effort, and everyone contributed. So you had 4 nuclear states after the Soviet Union was dissolved. Of them, 3 became non-nuclear weapon states, and we do not hear about any risks or dangers emanating from them. So that was a success story. So Senator Sam Nunn is a person who is now associated with the nuclear initiative, this NTI. It was done in the wake of the Obama the nuclear security summit processes. So this exercise of NTI was a kind of supplementary exercise which was supposed to bolster the effort of the summitry. And the effort was to be bolstered in a kind of an NGO activity, civil society activity, because governments were going to go through the summit process. Summit also requires meeting of Sheelkant, so it's well prepared. So governments can contribute in this whole process through this official channel. But NTI was a kind of a non-governmental process. However, the prestige which these people brought, so it has acquired a certain, in the international system, there is a certain respect to it. Like if you see the NTI report, Japanese, for instance, access them, they've talked to them, and the report says that they asked them what they could do, so they tried to do this, and their assessment improved. Now, the thing is that nuclear issues, you have Albert Einstein, who starts it by writing his letter to the US president about the German progressive. And he also had some very, very apt quotation where he says, when you try and solve a problem and only look at the easy problem, it's like you look at the deck of the ship and look at the soft place and drive as many nails as you can. Now, this is what is happening in the international field on nuclear issues. There are difficult areas where no progress is possible. Even CTBT, 20 years, ratification not possible. Fissile materials cut off, no progress is possible. So people willy-nilly are getting into the easier area where they can do something. Now that is good and bad. Good because some action should be required, should be done so that the issue doesn't go off the radar. Bad because in that process, convenience and ease seems to determine. Now, this whole nuclear threat, this NTI process has this kind of, it can be subjected to this overall critique. I will not say it's a fault, but it's a critique because they have chosen an area which is convenient. Because nuclear terrorism applies to sabotage, it applies to subversion, it applies to many other aspects. But they have just chosen nuclear material security as the area to track, which is good, it will contribute. And there's already a considerable work done in the past by IAEA, Interpol, so they can draw upon that. However, that is not the totality of the problem. Now this brings us to the media and the governments. When you talk about threat and the media takes it up, there are all kinds of ignoramuses who begin to write about it. For instance, I'll give you an example. In 1999, when the Japanese had a Tokai Mora incident, where some of them were pouring uranium solution, it achieved some criticality. Even as prestigious a paper as the International Herald Tribune, the first report says there's a nuclear meltdown in Japan. So everyone was aghast. Meltdown means actually reactor meltdown, as happened in Chernobyl. So the next day it was corrected, and my American friends, I was in the IAEA those days, and my American friends said, "Oh, I feel very bad. This chap should have been a little more careful." But this happened. Latest yesterday's story in America again. They say americium 241 has been found, and people are hurt. We have the oracle sitting here. Americium 241 has a very small half-life, but the story has come that at a facility in the US when they were handling plutonium for mocks or whatever, suddenly americium was leaked. I cannot believe it. If my physics is correct, this cannot happen. Because but then the story has come out in a day or two. They will correct it and there'll be more light thrown. The problem is that media gets this attention is focused. In the case of India, all these things are like they come down to roost, because the Indian Atomic Energy Establishment by nature has become, and it is the second generation of them, they have become a bit defensive, and the kind of attacks they are subjected to. So when anyone asks them any questions, they suspect that of being an inquisition, which is not correct, but they suspect. You can't help it. So this kind of a process, when the NTI index was prepared and they tried to reach out, I think the approaches were made. They were made in the Indian Embassy in Washington. And when I was involved with the preparation of the NTI index, these five chapters, I had advised them that they should talk to officials and because this might be, I constantly advise them that the way you are going, it is bound to come into problems with these states because its impact, though you want to map the situation in the world about nuclear material, and you want to give a picture to the summits that this is how matters stand, willy-nilly, it will imply naming and shaming of governments. And so if that is the impact, you should be, consequence management is also your requirement. You should be careful. So they tried, but for some reason the response probably either was not given or was not communicated to headquarters. So there were a lot of things. Since I am not in the government, I could only gently ask someone that, look, this is happening. I hope you're doing something about it. I am not a supplicant. So I can't go and go to these government officials and say, Baba, bataiye please. Because it's not, but the Indian bureaucracy is like that. They like people to come and be supplicant. So this is the real problem about NTI or anything else, human rights. The problem is Indian bureaucracy, and even from outside goes, there are only two quantum states.
Very well put.
Whether I should fear him or whether I should ignore him. So if you fear him, then oh please, they are prostrate. But if they have to ignore him, then they say, no, I'm very busy. And in back of the mind, oh, this guy is going to create my problem. He's increasing my work. This is the problem of bureaucracy in India. It's not only India, actually everywhere. Developing countries more than others. I mean, in SAARC, I had the experience. Other countries in India's neighborhood have worse bureaucracy. So this is the reason why all these international efforts for transparency gets into a problem. And hence, as Professor Rajamandraman said, it becomes again very passively pro-OECD, because some of the other OECD countries have had over the years, because of the very privileged and fortunate situations, they have bureaucracies which are a little more responsive than bureaucracies in the developing world. And also Russia and China, where again, because of Cold War hang-up, things are difficult. So you find that this international effort about the creation of this index has run into the problems, because who are on the top and who are on the bottom, it's north-south. So that is the difficulty. Now, then another aspect is that this nuclear security summit is a very critical process, because not only the fourth summit in 2016, which is supposed to be there, depending upon who comes to power in the US, we'll have to see how it goes further. And the thing in the United States, it's led by the United States. Let's have no doubt about it. And again, if you read on nuclear terrorism, they have done enormous amount of work. They have created Department of Homeland Security. They have been facing flag on the NSA and intelligence gathering. So they are going about this in a very multi-pronged fashion. This is one aspect which they feel where international cooperation might be useful. Hence, they've gone on for the summit. So when an American talks about it, he knows that the domestic aspects are being taken care of by their own homeland security. That could be one of the reasons why the Physical Protection Convention, which was the only international agreement dealing with this area, when it was amended in 2005, the US has still not ratified the amendment, because they are going about it, but in their Congress, these things go in a very different manner. They have some congressmen who start that they are somewhat familiar. But then in that process, the combination of these two chapters puts those countries whose material is not the safeguard, I think this is one. So invariably, it begins to project a certain bias for safeguards and full scope safeguards. Now, that is understandable, but it's nothing new. Countries like India or China or Russia, they have been dealing with this for a long time. So that is one problem. Second, when they bring in, as you mentioned, sir, about the governance issue and the threat perception. Now that is where there is a diversity of approaches. Internationally, you might approach it in terms of the store and gates and guards and accountancy. But another country might approach who is threatening me. So there the police and the system is actually worried about threat is coming from there. Now, if these two, there are divergences, then these divergences would result in contradictions. NTIs or the whole international process, not only NTI but even commit process, if you bring in the wolf and the sheep and the chicken, then you have a problem, because if you feed the wolf candies and think it will become a dog, it will not become a dog, which is what is happening over the last 20 years. All kinds of desperados, you try and engage with them, but they keep cheating. You have North Korea, who you've been talking, Six Nation Initiative, you give them oil, you give them food, but they went ahead and tested. So this is the reality of global nuclear situation. So by engagement or by talking to them, you cannot assure someone who fears the threat. The threat of a country which perceives the perception of the country which has a threat perception from a particular quarter, it will not go away by your talking to them. And lastly, by believing them, like if they say, "Oh, I have done this," so then you say, "Oh, well, they have done it," as you said that China got 100 marks. But you know that from Confucius' time, what China has been doing. They tell something, and it turns out to be different. Then later on, they say, like South Korea, in 2013, they said, "Oh, we have stopped dual-purpose supplies to North Korea." That means till then it was going on. So there is this whole process about state credibility. Now, you might say that your own credibility is also at question. But when I'm guarding, I'm not questioning my credibility because I know in the marrow of my bones where is my threat. So this is the kind of a situation which is my punchline. So there is a diversity in approaches and the sources of threat. While global route is important and desirable, and it should be supported, hence NTI process should be supported. But it is not exclusive, particularly in absence of mutual legal obligations among those concerned. This is a big gap. Mutual legal obligations. Physical Protection Convention was one, but that has been given just one item getting 100 marks out of something like 5 into 25, 30. So it's like question paper setting where you just give one particular crucial aspect only a small mark. Hence there is a problem when NTI grades countries. Therefore, care is needed. They must do it more carefully. My suggestion, as this article where I discussed very briefly, is that in the IAEA, when they were doing the database of illicit trafficking in the 90s, they did not just pick up the news reports. After getting the news report, they would go, the IAEA secretariat will approach the embassy, will say, "Look, we have received this news report. Would you like to say any comment about it?" Then the embassy will say, "Okay, we would like to comment." Then they will wait for that. And when the database will be published, they would say, "This is the incident reported and this is the comment." So there is a certain credibility of that whole database. But in this case, if there is no comment, if you've given a particular thing like regulatory authority, well, you say they have not a regulatory authority, but the government says, "I have a regulatory authority," then there is a kind of to and fro. So this is one thing which I found which is necessary. And second, again, I want to give the example of the database of the IAEA. It has evolved over the last 20 years. IAEA database, Mano, Yukio has been on the media, an NTI index document posted. He says there are 200 incidents every year. And he says much worse is that it could be tip of the iceberg, because those which are not reported we don't know what happens to them. However, what is evident, what is prima facie, India doesn't figure in those 200 incidents. Nuclear material security in India has not hit the headlines about any of these things. There have been some sundry instances about cobalt 60 or strontium or something which is used in vaccine. but nuclear material has not been there. So those who are guarding the area, they say, but where is the problem? Have you found anything? So this is where there's a gap in this international process.